this is Becky. Welcome back to my channel. I am just so excited about this video because I'm going to be talking about lost gifts. So I don't know about you, but if you're part of my collective, I would think you would resonate with the fact that you have spiritual gifts that maybe freak people out, have gotten you labeled some labels that you don't really want to stick, had been put through some traumas because of it. So hopefully I don't trigger anybody, but this is really cool because I really think that in this age of Aquarius, we're starting to see the veil lifting. We're having mass consciousness rise. It's just a great time to be alive, in my opinion. So the Bible is over 800 years, the Ethiopian Bible is over 800 years older than the King James Version and contains 81 books. So buried inside those extra pages, the ones that never made it into the Bible that most of the world reads, there is a description of what human beings used to be capable of. Ancient texts say there are about 7 abilities that have been stripped from humanity one by one across centuries. At each major rupture in the biblical narrative, and one of them might not be entirely gone. And I do believe that these are coming back in the children, which is why I'm so passionate about my mission. We have, so at each major rupture, right, we notice that there is a progression. So in the book of Enoch, it is a first-hand account of what the divine messenger showed about the original architectural design of creation and what humanity was designed to be and what happened when the design was violated. Depending on the text, these 7 abilities were either absent, suppressed, sealed, or severed. We are going to look at each one, not as mythology, not as allegory, but as the text described them with specific reasoning why each ability no longer functions the way it once did. So the first ability is direct communication with divine messengers. Believe me, this one has gotten me into trouble with so many people on the planet when I tell them that I get direct messages. They want to send me to see a doctor. But in 1 Enoch and chapters 12:30 through 36, Enoch enters into dialogue with the Watchers, which were the beings identified in Genesis 6 as the sons of God who exited at the threshold between the divine, existed, not exited. Dyslexia, I love it. Okay, existed at the threshold between the divine and the earthly realms. And what makes this encounter remarkable is not that it happens, it is how it's described. There is no prayer, there's no ritual preparation, there is no temple, no altar, no intermediary that's standing between Enoch and the messengers. He speaks to them directly. They respond. The text does not present this as miraculous. It does not call it a divine exception granted to just one extraordinary man. It describes it as the original mode of human relationship with the divine order. A two-way directional channel of communication built into the design of human existence. From the beginning, the book of Jubilees explains that Enoch was not unique in having this access. He was just the last one who maintained it clearly. And in chapter 4, verse 23, it records something specific that Enoch was, this is what it was, that Enoch was taken from humanity and placed permanently with the divine messengers, precisely to preserve the knowledge of this communication, because it was about to become inaccessible to everyone else. After the events of Genesis 6 between the Watchers and the human women, the violence and corruption that followed, this channel was severed, but not taken. This distinction runs through all 7 abilities, and matters more than you think. A severed connection implies broken infrastructure, something damaged by misuse or violation, not something removed as a deliberate punishment by divine authority. And that distinction changes the theological picture entirely. If the connection was severed rather than revoked, the question becomes, can it be repaired? The texts do not answer that directly, but they provide the detailed architecture of what the connection was. And you don't create a detailed description of something that you believe is permanently and irreversibly gone. The second ability is the language of creation. Jubilees 12:25-26 is one of the most densely significant passages in the entire Ethiopian canon, and it is almost completely unknown outside of academic circles. It records that before the Tower of Babel, before the dispersal of nations, all humanity shared a single language, not a common language in the ordinary sense, not a lingua franca, but, I lost my train, sorry, a language that existed at creation, the language Adam received at the Garden of Eden when he named the animals in Genesis 2. And in Jubilees, the naming of the animals is not a classification exercise. The names Adam gave were not labels assigned to neutral objects. They were inherent descriptions, the true sound forms for each created thing. To name something in the original language was not to label it, it was to speak its nature. Jubilees 3:28 extends this further. Before the fall, the animals also understood. This is when we're talking about telepathy, guys. It's real. The communication was not one directional, and it ran across the boundary that we now consider absolute. The boundary between human and non-human. After Babel, this linguistic capacity collapsed into the multiplicity of languages that we recognize in history. But here is where the text becomes extraordinary. Jubilees 12:26 records that the angel of the presence, one of the 7 angels of the divine presence, described in detail somewhere in the text, reopened the original language specifically for Abraham, taught him Hebrew as the restored original tongue, not a human language that happened to be chosen for Scripture. A language recovered from the sealed original, briefly reopened for one man, for a very specific conventional purpose. The implication of this passage is precise. The original language still exists. It was not destroyed at Babel. It was sealed, made inaccessible, and opened once under specific conditions for one individual. The ability to communicate in that mode in the language that connected the human speech to nature of created things is the second capacity of the Ethiopian text, described as lost, which I think is coming back. The third ability is extended biological time. And this is something that I think people are starting to realize through epigenetics and other science proving that this is true. This sounds like the simplest entry on the list. It may be the most theologically complex. The lifespans recorded in Genesis, Adam living 930 years, Methuselah living 969, Noah 950, they appear in the Ethiopian text with considerably more structural context than survives in other accounts. The Book of Jubilees operates within a precise chronological framework. Jubilees describes the extended lifespans of the pre-flood world. that aren't presented as miraculous exceptions. They are described as the expected baseline of the original human biological design. Then Jubilees 23, 8 through 15 arrives. This is a passage studied almost exclusively by specialists in Judaism. It describes the progressive shortening of human lifespan, not as natural biological decline, not as evolution, not as de-evolution, not as the gradual wearing out of a species. It describes it as a response, a consequence of the accumulation of the degradation of a covenant relationship between humanity and its creator. The text is explicit. In the days of Abraham, lifespans were already substantially shorter than in the days of Enoch and Noah. The days of Moses were shorter still, and the shortening would continue. What makes this passage theologically distinct from the chronological account is the mechanism. Jubilees does not say that God shortened human lifespans as an act of divine punishment. It says the shortening happened proportionally and relationally, not imposed from outside. Generated from within as a consequence of accumulated distance from the original design. This means that within the logic of the text that extended biological time was not a feature that simply disappeared through entropy. It was a feature that was suppressed. The mechanism of suppression was relational, not biological. The further humanity moved from the covenant, the shorter the baseline became. If we weren't going to do what our Creator needed us to do, then He wasn't going to give us more time, right? If you're in alignment with your divine blueprint, well, then you can have extended lifespan. Whether this is literally true is a separate question. What the text claims is clear. The original timeline for humans was substantially longer than anything that we experience, and its shortening was not inevitable. If what you are hearing is opening a door that you did not know existed, if you've read the Bible for years and never encountered this information, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a comment or hit the like button so I can know who is learning this for the very first time. It also lets the algorithm know that this content deserves to be heard, and it shares it with more people. So, I feel like too many people have been reading just half the Bible their entire lives. And they didn't even know that the other half existed. I didn't even get the Ethiopian Bible until just like 2 months ago. So that's why I'm so excited to share this information with you. So the fourth ability, reading the celestial architecture, we find this in one section of Enoch that's known as the Astronomical Book, chapters 72 through 82. And it is the oldest portion of the Enochical literature. Scholars confirmed that parts of this section predate other texts by approximately a century. It may be the oldest written document in the entire tradition, and in it, the angel Uriel takes Enoch on a guided tour. The paths of the sun, new moon, the structure of the winds, the sequence of the seasons, and the correct calendar, the 364-day solar calendar that the angel Uriel presents as the original design of celestial time. What Uriel shows Enoch is not mythology. It is a functional description of how the heavens were intended to communicate with humanity. The sky in this text was not created as decoration. It was not primarily a navigation aid. It was a clock, a calendar, and a revelation system. A mechanism by which the Creator communicated time and order to the created world directly through the structure of the visible reality, And then Uriel says something that changes the framework of the entire encounter. He tells Enoch that his knowledge was given to humanity from the beginning. The capacity to correctly read the celestial architecture was not a specialized gift reserved for just astrologers or priests. It was the original orientation system of the human species, built into the relationship between human consciousness and the visible sky. It had been corrupted. The Watchers had distorted humanity's relationship with the celestial system, introducing false interpretations, misleading signs, unauthorized astronomical knowledge that confused rather than clarified. Enoch is not receiving this knowledge for the first time. He's receiving a restoration, a correction of something that was once originally clear but had become opaque. The fourth lost ability was not astrology in any modern sense. It was the original capacity to correctly read temporal communication built into the structure, the path of creation, and to orient human life according to it. The fifth ability that was lost is prophetic vision without symbolic mediation. And again, when I share my prophetic visions, people really do not enjoy that. But the children can do this. There are others like me who can do this, and we learn to just shut up. But it's a time for us to start sharing our visions again. The kids need us to be teaching them how to use this gift. The ascension of Isaiah is part of the prophetic vision, part of the Ethiopian Orthodox canon. It is not in the Bible most people in the Western world read, and it contains a distinction that is theologically speaking, that is one of the most significant of all the Ethiopian extra-chronological material. In most prophetic literature that survives in the standard canon, Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, and Revelation, the prophets receive a vision that require interpretation. The vision is encoded in symbols. The four beasts, the great image of gold or iron and clay, the rider on the pale horse. The meaning is a present, but it's wrapped, and it requires a guide or an angel or a scholar to unwrap it before it becomes legible. The ascension of Isaiah describes a completely different mode. Isaiah is transported through the seven heavens by a divine guide. He sees the throne. He sees what the text calls beloved. It's term for the divine figure who will descend into the world. He sees the garments that had been prepared. He sees events that have not yet happened, and he sees all of these things directly, not symbolically, not through a coded image that needs to be decoded. He perceives them as they are without an interpretive layer between his consciousness and the reality being shown to him. His guide explains this. The explanation is the key. Well, the key to the fifth ability. He says this is what the prophets of the first age experienced before the veil became necessary. Before the veil, that phrase implies that historical transaction, a point in time before which the prophetic capacity was direct and unfiltered. And that's what we're seeing now, is we're back to being able to have these direct communications, these direct visions, these prophetic visions. So after the fall, after the corruption of Genesis 6, and after the exile, at each point, the connection became more mediated, more symbolic, more in need of interpretation. The fifth lost ability was not the capacity to have visions. Visions continued through history. What was lost was the capacity to see without the veil, without the symbolic layer, without the need for an interpreter, standing between human consciousness and what was being shown. That was a way for people to keep control over us. The sixth ability that was lost is the medicinal knowledge embedded in creation. This is the entry with the most precise contextual anchor of all seven. It is not a general description. It is a specific narrative event with chapter and verse. Jubilees 10 through 14. After the flood, Noah faces a crisis. Evil spirits, described as the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which were the offspring of the unions in Genesis 6, had survived the flood. They could not be drowned, so they are now afflicting Noah's grandsons, causing illness, drawing them toward corruption. Noah prays, an angel of the presence responds, and the angel's response is not miraculous healing. Again, I said in a previous video, sometimes we want God to just fix the problem, and no, the angels will give us information and direction. The angel dictates a text. He instructs Noah to write down a complete catalog of medicines, the properties of plants, the properties of roots, the properties of elements of the earth, which compounds address which illnesses. Preparations will counteract which afflictions. A working medical knowledge that is practical. Jubilees 10:13 records it directly. We explain to Noah all the medicines of their diseases together with their seductions on how he might heal them with the herbs of the earth. Now, this is not presented as new knowledge invented after the flood. The framing of the text is explicit. This is recovered knowledge that was embedded in the design of the physical world from creation, in the chemistry of plants and properties of roots, the medicinal architecture of the organic earth, that humanity had lost access to through everything that had happened before the flood. This sixth ability was not magic or spiritual healing in the abstract sense. It was the natural, original capacity to correctly read the medicinal design embedded in creation. To understand what the earth was built to offer, not through angelic dictation in a moment of crisis, but as a standard dimension of the original human relationship with the physical world. Noah wrote it down. His sons carried it forward. Any trace of that knowledge underlies later traditions of herbalism and ancient pharmacy, as well as medicinal practices the Ethiopian texts do not say. They only record that it once existed and it was original rather than invented, and that it had to be retaught because it had been lost. The seventh ability is the authority over creation. And this one is fun. When you reach this level of co-creation, life really gets exciting. This one may still be partially active, and it's one that some of us who have had ancestors that could do it, and the ancestors are encouraging us not to lose these gifts. It's a lot of work, believe me. It's not something that I can say, oh, it just happens. No, this is a lifetime of cultivating this, and you have to maintain it, otherwise you lose your gifts. So, this one sounds more spiritual than the others, so stay with me, because the textual basis is specific and it leads somewhere entirely concrete. This is why a lot of my Native American, which were of the Cherokee descent, why they had so many women who were lost and missing and murdered. Genesis 1:28. In every canon, including the Ethiopian, records the original human mandate. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the animals of the earth. The Hebrew word translated as dominion, rata. It implies active governance, not passive ownership. active stewardship with real executive capacity. The Kabra Nagast, the Ethiopian glory of kings, described what this governance looked like in its most developed human expression. In Ethiopian tradition, Solomon is not merely a wise king, he is the ancestor of the Solomonic, I don't think I said that right, dynasty. The lineage that continued Ethiopian royal theology until the 20th century, and the Kabra Nagast attributes to Solomon a quality it calls the wisdom of creation, the ability to speak to animals and to be understood, to govern the natural order through a form of authority that was neither magic nor coercion, but the exercise of an original human capacity that Solomon alone had partially recovered. Now, I believe that he abused that gift and it got him into some trouble, but that's just my opinion. Jubilees 3:28 provides the foundation for what this originally looked like. Before the fall, the animals and Adam shared mutual comprehension. Jubilees records it precisely. The mouth of all the beasts, cattle, and birds, and whatever walked or moved was stopped from speaking on the day of the fall, because all of them had formerly spoken with one lip and one tongue. One lip, one tongue. The fall did not only affect human language. According to Jubilees, it sealed the communicative connection across the boundary between human and non-human creation. But then we're introduced to the original oath, the binding word by which it was held in its proper structure. It says that this oath was not destroyed at the fall, not dissolved at the flood, not broken at Babel. It was sealed, hidden, and entrusted to Michael. Sealed, not destroyed. This language of sealing rather than destruction is seen repeatedly across all 4 Ethiopian texts, and it is not accidental. Sealed things can be unsealed. Hidden things can be revealed. Things entrusted to the archangel can be returned when the conditions are met. Now here is where the Ethiopian tradition makes a claim that the rest of the world has largely overlooked. The Ethiopian calendar, the Gaia's calendar, still in daily active use by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, is not derived from Roman or Gregorian calculations. It's not based on the Julian calendar or the Alexandrian calendar adopted by most of the Eastern Christianity. It is based on the 364-day solar calendar described by Angel Uriel in Enoch, an astronomical book. The same calendar, the one with text, presents as the original celestial design built into creation from the beginning, corrupted by the watchers, and restored to Enoch as a corrected revelation. The Orthodox Ethiopian Church has maintained this calendar continuously for over 106,000 years, not as historical curiosity, not as an academic relic, but as their living liturgical framework. The structure from within which their worship, fasting cycles, feast days, and entire communal life are organized to this day. No other living Christian community on earth still uses this calendar. No other church carried it out through 2 millennia of religious history, colonial encounter, doctrinal dispute, and political pressure. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept it because they believe it is not merely an ancient calculation method. They believe it is the original time system described in the oldest section of the Book of Enoch, and the one Uriel called the correct orientation for human life, the one that Ethiopian tradition has maintained against every external force for 16 centuries. Whether the calendar carries the properties they attribute to it, whether aligning human life to the system actually maintains a connection with something in the original design is not something modern scholarship can confirm, but this is the single element across all 7 lost abilities that is not theoretical. It's not archaeological, it's not even historical, it's active. It is practiced every day by millions of people. So here's the full picture. The first ability, direct communication with divine messengers, severed after the corruption described in Genesis 6. The second ability, of original language of creation, sealed at Babel and briefly restored for Abraham through angelic intervention, recorded in Jubilees 12. The third ability, of extended biological time, not inevitable biological decline, but a relational suppression that progressed with each degradation of the covenant according to Jubilees 23. The fourth ability, of being able to read the celestial architecture as a living communication system, corrupted by the Watchers, restored to Enoch, documented in the oldest section of the Ethiopic texts. The fifth ability, of prophetic perception without symbolic mediation, progressively veiled at each major rupture in the biblical narrative according to the ascension of Isaiah. The sixth ability, of medicinal knowledge, embedded in the original design of creation, lost before the flood and dictated by an angel to Noah in Jubilees 10. The seventh ability, of communicative authority over creation, sealed rather than destroyed, and according to 1 Enoch 69, and maintained in a specific dimension by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church through the Enochian calendar to this day. These 7 are not scattered randomly through the Ethiopian text. They form a coherent portrait, a description of what the original human design contained, and a sequential account of how that design was diminished step by step at each rupture in the story. Not all at once, not by one event, progressively at each moment when the distance between humanity and the original covenant increased. And the Ethiopian tradition does not present this as the final state of affairs. The same text that described the loss also described the restoration. The astronomical book of Enoch ends not with permanent darkness, but with a promise. The elect will possess knowledge of the celestial architecture in the day of the great renewal, which is happening now. The book of Jubilees ends with a covenant. The text describes as still active, still holding. The ascension of Isaiah still ends in a vision of restoration that Isaiah does not receive symbolically, that he perceives directly without the veil, without an interpreter, as the mode of the first age. The Ethiopian canon did not preserve these texts as museum pieces. It preserved them as living witness, active testimony to what we were, to what was lost, and to what the same text with the same authority they used to describe the loss say remains possible. So I'm just really excited at what the future holds. I know there's so many people that are living in fear, saying, oh, this is the end of times and everything's going to get destroyed. But you know what? Humanity's been doing this since the beginning of time. My soul is from Lemuria, and if we want to go back to that story, pretty sure that we blew ourselves up at that time too. So in the Bible, yes, it talks about there will be wars and rumors of wars. But if you go through the Ethiopian Bible, it gives us the hope and the historical facts of the restoration, which is happening in the children today. And those of us elders that are finally having the confidence to speak up in spite of all the traumas that we've experienced with our time on this planet. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. And the light in me honors and respects the light in you. And I truly hope you have a blessed